Marcus Williams adjusted his backpack straps as he walked down the familiar sidewalk toward Jefferson High School. The 17-year-old had made this same journey countless times, but today felt different somehow. The morning air was crisp and the autumn leaves crunched beneath his worn sneakers. He checked his phone, 7:45 a.m. Perfect timing as always. Marcus wasn't the type of kid who drew attention to himself. He kept his grades decent, stayed out of trouble, and worked part-time at the local grocery store to help his single mother with bills. His friends often joked that he was too responsible for a teenager, but Marcus took pride in being reliable. His mother, Sarah Williams, had raised him with strong values after his father left when Marcus was just 8 years old. As he approached the intersection of Maple Street and 3rd Avenue, Marcus noticed the familiar sight of Officer Derek Hawkins' patrol car, parked near the corner convenience store. Officer Hawkins had been patrolling this neighborhood for nearly 15 years and had developed a reputation among the local teenagers. Some kids respected him, while others whispered stories about his aggressive tactics and quick temper. Marcus had never had any personal run-ins with Officer Hawkins, but he'd heard enough stories from classmates to be cautious. There was Tommy Rodriguez, who claimed Hawkins had searched his car without proper cause last month. Then there was Ashley Chen, who said the officer had been unnecessarily rough when breaking up a peaceful gathering at the park. These stories circulated through the school hallways like urban legends, but Marcus always wondered how much truth they contained. The convenience store, Sam's Corner Market, was owned by an elderly Pakistani immigrant named Samir Malik. Mr. Malik had always been kind to the neighborhood kids, often letting them know when they were a few cents short for their purchases or giving them free candy on their birthdays. The store served as an unofficial community hub, where neighbors gathered to chat and local teenagers stopped by for snacks and drinks. Marcus pushed open the glass door, hearing the familiar chime of the entrance bell. The store smelled like fresh coffee and the sweet aroma of pastries that Mr. Malik baked each morning. Behind the counter, the store owner looked up with his usual warm smile. "Good morning, Marcus." "The usual?" Mr. Malik asked, already reaching for a bottle of orange juice and a granola bar that Marcus typically bought before school. "Yes, sir. Thank you," Marcus replied, digging into his pocket for the exact change. He appreciated that Mr. Malik remembered his regular customers and their preferences. It made the store feel more like a neighborhood family business than just another convenience shop. As Marcus approached the counter, he noticed another customer browsing the snack aisle. The man was tall, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over his head, and seemed to be taking an unusually long time selecting items. Something about his behavior struck Marcus as odd, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Mr. Malik rang up Marcus's items with practiced efficiency. "How is school going? And your mother, how is she doing?" "Everything's good, thank you for asking. Mom's working double shifts at the diner this week, but we're managing," Marcus answered honestly. He had learned to appreciate adults who showed genuine interest in his well-being. The hooded customer finally approached the counter with a bag of chips and an energy drink. As he placed the items down, Marcus caught a glimpse of his face. The man appeared nervous, constantly glancing toward the windows and checking his phone. His hand seemed unsteady as he fumbled for his wallet. "That'll be $4.50, Mr. Malik said pleasantly to the hooded customer. Marcus gathered his items and headed toward the door, eager to make it to school on time. He had a chemistry test first period that he'd studied hard for, and he didn't want to be late. As he reached for the door handle, he heard a commotion behind him. "Hey, stop right there!" a voice shouted from outside. Through the glass door, Marcus could see Officer Hawkins approaching the store rapidly, his hand resting on his service weapon. The officer's face was stern and focused, suggesting he was responding to some kind of emergency or suspicious activity. Marcus instinctively stepped back from the door as Officer Hawkins burst into the store. The sudden entrance startled both Marcus and Mr. Malik, while the hooded customer seemed to freeze in place near the counter. "Nobody move," Officer Hawkins commanded, his voice filling the small space with authority and tension. The atmosphere in the store shifted dramatically. What had been a peaceful morning routine suddenly felt charged with danger and uncertainty. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he tried to understand what was happening. He looked at Mr. Malik, whose confused expression mirrored his own feelings. Officer Hawkins quickly scanned the store, his trained eyes taking in every detail. His gaze lingered on the hooded customer, then moved to Marcus and finally settled back on the man by the counter. The silence stretched uncomfortably as everyone waited for the officer to explain his dramatic entrance. "We received a report of suspicious activity in this area," Officer Hawkins announced, though he didn't specify what kind of activity or who had reported it. Marcus remained perfectly still, knowing that any sudden movement might escalate the situation. He had been taught by his mother to always comply with police officers and to keep his hands visible at all times. These weren't just abstract lessons anymore. They had suddenly become very real and very important. The hooded customer slowly raised his hands, clearly understanding the gravity of the situation. Mr. Malik stood behind his counter, looking between the officer and his customers with growing concern. "I'm going to need everyone to remain calm while I sort this out," Officer Hawkins continued, his tone leaving no room for argument. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary. He thought about his chemistry test, about his mother working her double shift, about all the normal things that now seemed far away and unimportant. Whatever was about to happen in Sam's Corner Market would change everything, though Marcus had no way of knowing just how dramatically his life was about to be altered. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything Marcus believed about justice, truth, and standing up for what's right. Officer Hawkins moved with calculated precision through the small convenience store, his eyes scanning every corner and detail. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife as the three civilians, Marcus, Mr. Malik, and the hooded customer, waited nervously for his next move. "Sir, step away from the counter with your hands visible," Officer Hawkins directed toward the hooded customer, who immediately complied. The man pulled back his hood, revealing a young face that looked no older than 25. His nervous demeanor had intensified since the officer's arrival. Marcus watched the interaction carefully, still clutching his orange juice and granola bar. He wanted nothing more than to leave for school, but something told him this situation was far from over. The morning sun streamed through the store windows, creating an almost surreal contrast to the tense atmosphere inside. Officer Hawkins approached the hooded customer and began speaking in low tones. Marcus couldn't hear the exact words, but he could see the young man shaking his head repeatedly and gesturing with his hands. After a few minutes of conversation, something unexpected happened. The hooded customer pointed directly at Marcus. "That's him, officer. That's the kid who was acting suspicious when I came in," the man said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What, I wasn't doing anything suspicious. I just bought my usual snacks like I do every morning," he protested, looking between Officer Hawkins and Mr. Malik for support. Mr. Malik immediately spoke up. "Officer, Marcus is a good boy. He comes here every morning before school. He's never caused any trouble." But Officer Hawkins seemed to have already made up his mind. He turned his full attention to Marcus, studying him with an intensity that made the teenager extremely uncomfortable. There was something in the officer's expression that suggested this wasn't just about suspicious behavior anymore. "Young man, I'm going to need you to empty your pockets and place everything on the counter," Officer Hawkins commanded. "But I haven't done anything wrong," Marcus replied, his voice cracking slightly from nervousness and confusion. "Empty your pockets, now," the officer repeated, his tone becoming more aggressive. Marcus reluctantly complied, placing his wallet, cell phone, house keys, and some loose change on the counter next to Mr. Malik's register. His hands were shaking slightly, not from guilt but from the overwhelming stress of being treated like a criminal when he had done nothing wrong. Officer Hawkins examined each item carefully, opening Marcus's wallet and flipping through its contents. He found Marcus's student ID, a few dollars in cash, and a photo of Marcus with his mother. "Nothing suspicious or illegal. What about your backpack?" Officer Hawkins asked. "It just has my school books and homework," Marcus answered honestly. "Open it." Marcus unzipped his backpack and began removing items: textbooks, notebooks, pens, his lunch that his mother had packed, and his chemistry notes for the test he was supposed to take that morning. Again, nothing unusual or concerning. But then something strange happened. As Marcus was placing his items back into his backpack, Officer Hawkins suddenly reached into the bag and pulled out a small plastic baggie containing what appeared to be marijuana. "Well, well, well. What do we have here?" Officer Hawkins said with a triumphant tone that made Marcus's blood run cold. "That's not mine," Marcus exclaimed immediately. I've never seen that before in my life. Someone must have put it there. Mr. Malik looked shocked. Marcus, is this true? I don't understand. Mr. Malik, I swear on my mother's life that is not mine. I don't do drugs. I've never even smoked a cigarette. Marcus pleaded desperately. The hooded customer, who had been standing quietly nearby, suddenly became very interested in examining the selection of lottery tickets near the door. His earlier nervousness seemed to have disappeared, replaced by what looked almost like relief. Officer Hawkins held up the baggie as if it were evidence in a major drug bust. Son, possession of marijuana is a serious offense. You're under arrest. Please, officer, there has to be some mistake, Marcus said, his voice now clearly panicked. I was just buying my breakfast like I do every single morning. Ask Mr. Malik, he'll tell you I'm a good kid. But Officer Hawkins was already reaching for his handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the Miranda rights continued, Marcus felt like he was trapped in a nightmare. This couldn't be happening. He thought about his mother, who would be devastated when she found out. He thought about his perfect attendance record at school, his part-time job, his plans for college. Everything seemed to be crumbling around him. Mr. Malik tried once more to defend Marcus. Officer Hawkins, I've known this boy for 3 years. His mother is a hard-working woman, and Marcus has never given anyone trouble. There must be some explanation for this. The explanation is simple, Officer Hawkins replied curtly. The boy was caught with illegal substances. The evidence speaks for itself. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Marcus felt a surge of anger alongside his fear. Something about this entire situation felt wrong, orchestrated somehow. The timing of the hooded customer's accusation, the convenient discovery of drugs in his backpack, Officer Hawkins's seemingly predetermined attitude. It all felt too coincidental. This isn't over, Marcus said quietly, trying to maintain some dignity despite his circumstances. The truth will come out. Officer Hawkins smirked slightly. The truth is that you're a drug dealer, son, and now you're going to face the consequences. As they prepared to leave the store, Marcus caught Mr. Malik's eye. The elderly store owner looked deeply troubled, as if he sensed the same wrongness that Marcus felt. Their brief eye contact seemed to communicate a silent understanding. This was bigger than a simple drug possession case. The hooded customer quickly completed his purchase and left the store without looking back, disappearing into the morning crowd as if he had never been there at all. His convenient exit only added to Marcus's growing suspicion that this entire encounter had been carefully planned. As Officer Hawkins led him toward the patrol car, Marcus's mind raced with questions. How had drugs ended up in his backpack? Who was the hooded customer, and why had he pointed the finger at Marcus? Most importantly, why did Officer Hawkins seem so satisfied with this arrest, as if it had been exactly what he was hoping for? The answers to these questions would prove to be more shocking than Marcus could have ever imagined. The holding cell at the county jail was nothing like Marcus had ever imagined. The cold concrete walls and harsh fluorescent lighting created an atmosphere of despair that seemed to seep into his very bones. He sat on the narrow bench, still wearing his school clothes, trying to process everything that had happened in the past few hours. His mother, Sarah Williams, had arrived at the jail within an hour of his arrest. Her face was a mixture of shock, fear, and determination as she spoke with the desk sergeant about her son's situation. Sarah worked double shifts at the diner to support them both, and she knew her son better than anyone. Marcus had never so much as stayed out past curfew, let alone gotten involved with drugs. I need to call a lawyer, Sarah told the sergeant firmly. My son is innocent. Ma'am, he was caught with marijuana in his possession. The arresting officer has filed a complete report, the sergeant replied in a tone that suggested he had heard similar claims countless times before. But Sarah Williams was not easily discouraged. She had been fighting uphill battles her entire life, and she wasn't about to let her son become a victim of injustice. After making several phone calls, she managed to secure the services of Diana Rodriguez, a young public defender with a reputation for taking on difficult cases. Diana Rodriguez arrived at the jail that afternoon with a briefcase full of legal documents and a determination to get to the bottom of Marcus's case. She was a petite woman in her early 30s with sharp eyes and an even sharper legal mind. She had grown up in a similar neighborhood and understood how quickly a young person's life could be derailed by the criminal justice system. Marcus, I want you to tell me everything that happened this morning. From the moment you woke up until Officer Hawkins put you in handcuffs, Diana said, pulling out a yellow legal pad to take notes. Marcus recounted every detail he could remember, from his normal morning routine to the strange behavior of the hooded customer, to the moment the drugs mysteriously appeared in his backpack. Diana listened carefully, occasionally asking clarifying questions and making detailed notes. The timeline is important here, Diana explained. You're telling me that at no point did you have access to drugs and that your backpack was with you the entire time until Officer Hawkins searched it? That's right, Marcus confirmed. I packed my backpack myself last night with my homework and books. I carried it straight to the store and I never let it out of my sight. Diana's experience told her that something about this case didn't add up. She had handled dozens of drug possession cases and Marcus's story had the ring of truth to it. More importantly, his background check came back completely clean. No prior arrests, excellent grades, steady employment, and glowing character references from teachers and his employer. The next day, Diana decided to visit Sam's Corner Market to speak with Mr. Mullick. She found the elderly store owner visibly upset about the incident involving Marcus. That boy has been coming to my store for 3 years, Mr. Mullick told Diana earnestly. He is respectful, polite, and has never caused any trouble. What happened yesterday felt wrong from the very beginning. Can you tell me about the other customer who was in the store? The man in the hoodie? Diana asked. Mr. Mullick's expression darkened. There was something strange about that man. He spent a very long time looking at snacks, much longer than normal customers. And when Officer Hawkins arrived, the man seemed to know exactly what to say and do. This information piqued Diana's interest. She asked Mr. Mullick if he had security cameras in the store. Yes, I have cameras that record everything. I save the footage for 30 days in case of problems, Mr. Mullick replied. Diana's heart raced with excitement. Mr. Mullick, I'm going to need a copy of that footage from yesterday morning. It could be crucial to proving Marcus's innocence. While Diana worked on obtaining the security footage, she also began investigating Officer Derek Hawkins's background. What she discovered was deeply troubling. Over the past 5 years, Hawkins had been involved in an unusually high number of drug-related arrests of young people, particularly teenagers from minority families. Even more concerning, several of these cases had resulted in complaints about aggressive behavior and questionable search procedures. Diana found records of at least 6 formal complaints filed against Officer Hawkins in the past 2 years. The complaints ranged from excessive force to conducting searches without proper probable cause. Each complaint had been investigated internally by the police department and dismissed due to insufficient evidence, but the pattern was unmistakable. One complaint stood out in particular. It had been filed by the parents of Tommy Rodriguez, the same student Marcus had mentioned hearing stories about. According to the complaint, Officer Hawkins had stopped Tommy's car for a routine traffic violation, but had then conducted an extensive search that resulted in drug charges. The charges were later dropped when Tommy's lawyer proved that the search had been conducted illegally. As Diana dug deeper, she discovered something even more disturbing. Officer Hawkins's arrest statistics showed an unusual pattern. His drug busts almost always involved small amounts of marijuana found in backpacks, pockets, or vehicles belonging to teenagers. The amounts were typically just enough to warrant possession charges, but not large enough to suggest serious dealing. More troubling still, Diana found evidence that many of these arrests occurred in conjunction with the same mysterious tipster, someone who would call in reports of suspicious activity that would prompt Officer Hawkins to investigate. The timing of these tips was remarkably convenient, often occurring just as teenagers were walking to school or hanging out in public places. When Diana finally obtained the security footage from Mr. Mullick's store, what she saw confirmed her worst suspicions. The footage clearly showed Marcus entering the store with his backpack, purchasing his usual items, and maintaining control of his belongings throughout his visit. But more importantly, it revealed something that would change everything. The hooded customer could be seen on camera behaving in exactly the suspicious manner that Mr. Mullick had described. But there was something else, something that made Diana's blood run cold. At one point, while Marcus was distracted talking to Mr. Mullick, the hooded customer moved closer to where Marcus had temporarily set down his backpack while counting change. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but it appeared to show the hooded customer making a subtle movement toward Marcus's backpack. The timing was crucial. This happened just minutes before Officer Hawkins arrived at the store. Diana realized she was looking at evidence of a setup. Someone had planted drugs in Marcus's backpack, and Officer Hawkins had arrived with perfect timing to discover them. But who was the hooded customer, and why would he work with Officer Hawkins to frame an innocent teenager? The answer to that question would prove to be the key to exposing a corruption scandal that went much deeper than anyone had imagined. Diana knew she was no longer just defending a teenager accused of drug possession. She was uncovering evidence of a conspiracy that could destroy careers and send people to prison. As she prepared for Marcus's court hearing, Diana felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had the evidence to prove Marcus's innocence, but she also had the power to expose a corrupt system that had been destroying young lives for years. The question now was whether the justice system would be willing to hold its own accountable. Diana Rodriguez spent the next 3 days conducting the most intensive investigation of her legal career. The security footage from Mr. Malik's store was just the beginning of what would prove to be a far-reaching conspiracy involving police corruption, false arrests, and the systematic targeting of innocent teenagers. Working late into the night at her small downtown office, Diana began connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture. She had obtained phone records, arrest reports, and witness statements that revealed a pattern of coordinated activities between Officer Hawkins and several other individuals. The breakthrough came when Diana decided to investigate the identity of the hooded customer from the store. Using the security footage, she was able to get a clear image of the man's face. She ran the image through various databases and discovered that the mysterious customer was actually Jake Morrison, a 26-year-old man with a lengthy criminal record including drug possession, theft, and assault charges. More importantly, Diana discovered that Jake Morrison had been arrested by Officer Hawkins 6 months earlier on serious drug trafficking charges. Facing potential prison time, Morrison had suddenly become a confidential informant for the police department. His cooperation had resulted in all charges against him being dropped, and he had been released without serving any jail time. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. Diana realized that Officer Hawkins had been using Morrison and potentially other criminal informants to plant evidence and create false arrests. The scheme was designed to boost Hawkins's arrest statistics while simultaneously destroying the lives of innocent young people who had no way to defend themselves. Against planted evidence, Diana's investigation revealed that Officer Hawkins had been under pressure from his supervisors to increase his drug-related arrest numbers. The police department had been receiving federal funding based on their drug enforcement statistics, creating a perverse incentive to make as many drug arrests as possible, regardless of whether the arrests were legitimate. She discovered that Hawkins had developed a systematic approach to his fraudulent arrests. He would identify targets, typically teenagers from single-parent households or families without significant financial resources to hire expensive lawyers. These victims were chosen specifically because they would be less likely to effectively challenge the charges in court. The scheme worked like this. Morrison or another informant would call in a tip about suspicious activity in a specific location. Officer Hawkins would respond to the call and approach the targeted individual. During the encounter, the informant would either plant evidence on the person or in their belongings, or claim to have witnessed the person engaging in illegal activity. Hawkins would then discover the evidence and make an arrest. Diana found records indicating that this scheme had been operating for at least 18 months. During that time, Officer Hawkins had arrested nearly 30 teenagers on drug-related charges. Most of these young people had accepted plea bargains rather than fight the charges in court, either because they couldn't afford adequate legal representation or because they were advised that fighting the charges would result in harsher sentences if they lost. The human cost of this corruption was staggering. Diana tracked down several of Hawkins's previous victims and discovered that their lives had been severely damaged by the false arrests. Students had been expelled from school, young people had lost jobs and college opportunities, and families had been torn apart by the stress and financial burden of dealing with criminal charges. One particularly heartbreaking case involved Ashley Chen, an honor student who had been arrested by Officer Hawkins for marijuana possession just 2 months earlier. Ashley had been walking home from her job at a local bookstore when Hawkins stopped her for acting suspiciously. Despite maintaining her innocence, Ashley had been convinced by her court-appointed lawyer to accept a plea bargain that resulted in probation and community service. The arrest had cost her a full scholarship to a prestigious university, and she was now working full-time to support her family instead of pursuing her education. Diana also discovered that the corruption extended beyond just Officer Hawkins and his informants. She found evidence suggesting that Hawkins's supervisor, Sergeant Michael Barnes, was aware of the unusually high arrest numbers, but had chosen not to investigate. Barnes had been receiving commendations and promotion opportunities based on his unit's impressive drug enforcement statistics. Even more troubling, Diana uncovered evidence that the police department's Internal Affairs Division had received multiple complaints about Officer Hawkins's tactics but had consistently dismissed them without proper investigation. The complaints had been filed by parents, community members, and even some fellow police officers who had grown suspicious of Hawkins's methods. The evidence Diana had gathered was overwhelming, but she knew that exposing police corruption would be an uphill battle. She needed to be absolutely certain of her facts and prepared for the intense scrutiny that would follow her accusations. Diana decided to reach out to investigative journalist Maria Santos, who worked for the local newspaper and had a reputation for exposing government corruption. Maria had been following stories about questionable police practices in the area and was immediately interested in Diana's findings. Together, Diana and Maria began building an airtight case against Officer Hawkins and his co-conspirators. They interviewed additional victims, reviewed more security footage from other businesses in the area, and obtained expert testimony about the planted evidence. One of their most significant discoveries came when they found a witness who had observed Morrison and Hawkins meeting privately on multiple occasions. The witness, an elderly man who walked his dog in the park every morning, had noticed the two men having secretive conversations and thought their behavior was suspicious. Diana also learned that Morrison had been bragging to friends about his arrangement with Officer Hawkins. One of Morrison's former cellmates came forward with information about conversations in which Morrison had described his role in planting evidence and framing innocent people. Morrison had apparently viewed his cooperation with Hawkins as a way to avoid prison time while getting revenge on society. As Diana prepared for Marcus's court hearing, she realized that she wasn't just defending one innocent teenager anymore. She was about to expose a criminal conspiracy that had destroyed dozens of lives and corrupted the very system that was supposed to protect the community. The evidence she had gathered would not only prove Marcus's innocence but would also likely result in criminal charges against Officer Hawkins, Jake Morrison, and potentially others involved in the conspiracy. The story would make national headlines and force a complete investigation of the police department's practices. But Diana knew that the most important outcome would be justice for Marcus and all the other young people whose lives had been damaged by this corruption. She was determined to ensure that their voices would finally be heard and that the truth would prevail in court, no matter how powerful the forces arrayed against them. The courthouse was packed beyond capacity on the morning of Marcus Williams's hearing. Word had spread throughout the community about the serious allegations that defense attorney Diana Rodriguez planned to present. Local news crews lined the hallway outside the courtroom, and concerned parents filled every available seat, hoping to learn whether their own children might have been victims of the same corruption that had targeted Marcus. Judge Helen Morrison, no relation to the informant, Jake Morrison, presided over the proceedings with the gravitas that such serious allegations demanded. Judge Morrison had been on the bench for over 20 years and had developed a reputation for fairness and intolerance for misconduct in her courtroom. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Robert Crawford, a career prosecutor who had worked closely with the police department for over a decade. Crawford appeared confident as he reviewed his notes, apparently unaware of the bombshell evidence that Diana Rodriguez was prepared to present. Marcus sat at the defense table wearing a borrowed suit that was slightly too large for his 17-year-old frame. His mother, Sarah Williams, sat directly behind him in the first row, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. Despite the overwhelming stress of the situation, Marcus maintained his composure, drawing strength from his absolute certainty in his own innocence. District Attorney Crawford began his opening statement with a straightforward presentation of the charges. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a young man who made poor choices and got caught with illegal drugs. The evidence is clear and simple. Officer Derek Hawkins found marijuana in the defendant's backpack during a routine investigation. The defendant was caught red-handed, and justice demands that he face the consequences of his actions. Crawford's confidence was evident as he described what he believed to be a straightforward drug possession case. He presented Officer Hawkins as a dedicated law enforcement professional who had simply been doing his job when he discovered the evidence of Marcus's alleged crime. When it came time for the defense opening statement, Diana Rodriguez stood slowly and surveyed the packed courtroom. She knew that what she was about to say would shock everyone present and potentially change the course of multiple lives forever. Your Honor, members of the jury, what you are about to hear is not a simple story about drug possession, Diana began, her voice clear and steady. What you are about to hear is a story about corruption, conspiracy, and the systematic framing of innocent children by those sworn to protect them. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Diana's words sank in. District Attorney Crawford looked up sharply from his notes, clearly surprised by the direction of the defense strategy. The evidence will show that my client, Marcus Williams, was the victim of an elaborate scheme designed to create false arrests and boost police statistics. We will prove that Officer Derek Hawkins, working with a criminal informant named Jake Morrison, deliberately planted drugs in Marcus's backpack as part of a pattern of corruption that has destroyed the lives of dozens of innocent young people in our community. Judge Morrison called for order as the courtroom erupted in surprised conversations. Several members of the jury appeared shocked by the allegations, while others seemed skeptical that such serious accusations could be true. Diana continued her opening statement by outlining the evidence she planned to present. Security footage showing the planted evidence, phone records proving coordination between Hawkins and Morrison, testimony from other victims, and expert analysis of the police department's arrest patterns. The prosecution's case proceeded as Crawford had planned, with Officer Hawkins taking the stand to describe his version of events. Hawkins appeared confident and professional, as he testified about responding to a tip about suspicious activity and subsequently discovering marijuana in Marcus's backpack. The defendant was acting nervously when I arrived. At the store, Hawkins testified. Based on my training and experience, his behavior was consistent with someone engaged in illegal activity. When I searched his backpack, I found a baggie containing what appeared to be marijuana. Under direct examination by Crawford, Hawkins presented himself as a dedicated officer simply doing his job. He denied any knowledge of evidence planting or conspiracy, characterizing Diana's allegations as desperate attempts to discredit legitimate police work. But when Diana began her cross-examination of Officer Hawkins, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed dramatically. Armed with months of investigation and overwhelming evidence, Diana systematically dismantled Hawkins's testimony. Officer Hawkins, how many teenagers have you arrested for marijuana possession in the past 18 months? Diana asked. I don't have an exact number, but I've made several arrests related to drug possession, Hawkins replied carefully. Diana approached the witness stand with a thick folder of documents. According to police department records, you have arrested 29 teenagers for marijuana possession in the past 18 months. Does that number seem accurate to you? Hawkins shifted uncomfortably in his seat. If that's what the records show, then yes. And isn't it true that in 26 of those 29 cases, the marijuana was found in backpacks or bags belonging to the defendants? Drug users often carry their contraband in bags, Hawkins replied defensively. Diana smiled slightly. Officer Hawkins, do you know Jake Morrison? The question hit Hawkins like a physical blow. His confident demeanor cracked for the first time, and he hesitated before answering. I may have encountered Mr. Morrison in my professional capacity, he said carefully. Encountered him? Officer Hawkins, didn't you arrest Jake Morrison on drug trafficking charges 6 months ago? Yes, I believe I did arrest someone by that name. And isn't it true that all charges against Mr. Morrison were mysteriously dropped after he agreed to become a confidential informant? District Attorney Crawford objected, but Judge Morrison allowed the question to stand. Informant relationships are confidential, Hawkins replied, but his discomfort was obvious to everyone in the courtroom. Diana then played the security footage from Mr. Malik's store on a large screen visible to the entire courtroom. The footage clearly showed Jake Morrison behaving suspiciously and appearing to tamper with Marcus's backpack while Marcus was distracted at the counter. The impact on the courtroom was immediate and dramatic. Gasps and murmurs filled the air as people watched what appeared to be evidence being planted in real time. Several jury members leaned forward to get a better view, their expressions showing shock and disbelief. Officer Hawkins, can you explain how Jake Morrison knew to be in that store at exactly the same time you responded to a call about suspicious activity? Diana asked. Hawkins had no good answer. His story was falling apart in front of a packed courtroom, and everyone could see it happening. Diana continued her devastating cross-examination by presenting phone records showing multiple calls between Hawkins and Morrison in the days leading up to Marcus's arrest. She also presented testimony from other victims who had been arrested under similar circumstances, all involving Morrison or other known informants. The prosecution's case collapsed completely when Diana called Mr. Malik to testify. The elderly store owner's emotional testimony about Marcus's character and his observations about Morrison's suspicious behavior provided compelling evidence that the entire arrest had been orchestrated. As the day progressed, it became clear that Marcus Williams was not just innocent of the charges against him. He was the victim of a criminal conspiracy that had operated for months without detection. The evidence presented by Diana Rodriguez was so overwhelming that even District Attorney Crawford appeared stunned by the revelations. The courtroom had become the stage for a battle between truth and institutional power, and truth was winning decisively. But the most dramatic moments were still to come. The final day of Marcus Williams's hearing arrived with an atmosphere of anticipation that could be felt throughout the courthouse. News of the corruption allegations had spread far beyond the local community, with national media outlets sending reporters to cover what was being called one of the most significant police corruption cases in recent memory. Diana Rodriguez had spent the previous evening preparing for what she knew would be the most important closing argument of her career. She wasn't just fighting for Marcus's freedom anymore. She was fighting for justice for every young person who had been victimized by Officer Hawkins's criminal conspiracy. As the courtroom filled to capacity once again, Marcus sat quietly at the defense table, drawing strength from the support of his mother and the knowledge that the truth was finally being revealed. He had grown up considerably during the past few weeks, forced to confront the reality that sometimes the very people meant to protect society could become its greatest threats. Before the closing arguments began, Judge Morrison addressed a surprise development that had occurred overnight. District Attorney Crawford stood to make an announcement that stunned everyone present. Your Honor, based on the evidence presented during this hearing, the District Attorney's office is immediately dropping all charges against Marcus Williams. Furthermore, we are launching a comprehensive investigation into the allegations of police misconduct that have been raised during these proceedings. The courtroom erupted in applause and cheers, but Judge Morrison quickly called for order. Marcus felt tears of relief streaming down his face as his mother reached forward to embrace him from behind the barrier, separating the gallery from the defense table. But Diana Rodriguez wasn't finished. She stood and addressed the court with a passion that reflected months of painstaking investigation and a deep commitment to justice. Your Honor, while we are grateful that the charges against Marcus Williams have been dropped, we believe this case represents something much larger than one wrongful arrest. The evidence we have presented reveals a systematic pattern of corruption that has destroyed the lives of dozens of innocent young people in our community. Diana then made a request that would ensure the full truth came to light. We respectfully request that this court refer all evidence gathered during these proceedings to the appropriate authorities for criminal investigation. We also request that the court order a comprehensive review of all arrests made by Officer Derek Hawkins during the past 2 years. Judge Morrison, who had presided over thousands of cases during her career, appeared deeply moved by the evidence that had been presented. In her remarks to the courtroom, she made it clear that the allegations raised serious questions about the integrity of the entire criminal justice system. The evidence presented in this case is deeply troubling and suggests a level of corruption that strikes at the very heart of our justice system. Judge Morrison stated, I am ordering a complete investigation into these allegations and directing that all evidence be turned over to the State Attorney General's office for potential criminal prosecution. The judge also took the unusual step of addressing the community directly from the bench. To the families and young people who may have been affected by similar misconduct, I want you to know that this court takes these allegations with the utmost seriousness. Justice delayed is justice denied, and we will not allow corruption to go unpunished, regardless of who is involved. As news of the hearing's outcome spread throughout the community, the impact was immediate and far-reaching. Within hours of Judge Morrison's ruling, 3 additional families came forward with allegations that their children had been victims of similar planted evidence schemes involving Officer Hawkins and his informants, the state attorney general's office moved quickly to launch a comprehensive investigation. Within a week, criminal charges were filed against Officer Derek Hawkins for conspiracy, evidence tampering, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. Jake Morrison was arrested and charged with conspiracy and perjury, and he quickly agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. The investigation revealed that the corruption was even more extensive than Diana had originally suspected. Internal affairs records showed that complaints about Hawkins's tactics had been systematically ignored or buried by department supervisors who were more concerned about arrest statistics than about justice. Sergeant Michael Barnes, Hawkins's immediate supervisor, was suspended pending investigation and ultimately faced charges for his role in covering up the misconduct. The police chief announced a complete review of department policies and procedures, and several other officers were placed under investigation for their potential involvement in similar schemes. For Marcus Williams, the ordeal had ended with complete vindication, but the experience had changed him profoundly. He returned to school as something of a local hero, with classmates and teachers expressing amazement at his courage in fighting the charges rather than accepting a plea bargain, like so many others had done. Marcus used his newfound platform to advocate for other young people who had been victimized by police misconduct. He began speaking at community meetings and school assemblies about the importance of standing up for truth and justice, even when facing overwhelming odds. His mother, Sarah Williams, reflected on how the experience had tested their family's faith and resilience. "I always taught Marcus to respect authority and follow the rules," she said in an interview with the local newspaper. "But this experience taught us both that sometimes you have to fight authority when it becomes corrupt." Diana Rodriguez found herself inundated with calls from other families seeking legal help for similar cases. The publicity from Marcus's case had given her the resources and credibility to take on police misconduct cases that she never could have handled before. She established a legal clinic specifically focused on helping young people who had been victims of planted evidence and false arrests. Mr. Malik, the store owner whose security cameras had provided crucial evidence, became an unexpected hero in the community. His willingness to preserve the footage and cooperate with the investigation had been essential to exposing the truth. Local residents began supporting his store even more than before, grateful for his role in bringing justice to their neighborhood. The ripple effects of Marcus's case continued for months. A federal investigation was launched into the police department's practices, resulting in significant reforms in the implementation of new oversight procedures. Several other police departments in the state began reviewing their own arrest patterns to identify potential similar misconduct. Most importantly, more than 20 young people who had been wrongfully convicted based on planted evidence had their cases reviewed and their records cleared. Many were able to reclaim opportunities that had been stolen from them, including college admissions and job prospects that had been destroyed by their false criminal records. Officer Derek Hawkins was ultimately convicted on multiple felony charges and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His conviction sent a clear message throughout law enforcement that corruption and civil rights violations would not be tolerated, regardless of an officer's rank or connections. Marcus Williams graduated from high school with honors and received multiple scholarship offers from universities across the country. His experience with the justice system had inspired him to pursue a career in law, with plans to follow in Diana Rodriguez's footsteps as a defense attorney fighting for the wrongfully accused. In his graduation speech, Marcus reflected on the lessons he had learned from his ordeal. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up and tell the truth, even when powerful people want you to stay quiet, he told his classmates. Justice isn't something that just happens. It's something we have to fight for every single day. The case of Marcus Williams versus corruption had ended with complete victory for truth and justice. But more importantly, it had demonstrated that even a teenager with no money or power could take on a corrupt system and win, as long as he had the courage to fight and people willing to stand beside him in the pursuit of justice.